What is up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel. Now, about a week and a half ago, I created a video talking about why people were leaving California. The reason why I created this video and kind of the idea behind it was the fact that Graham Stephan, a known Californian, had announced his departure of California and the fact that he was moving to the neighboring state of Nevada. Now, in the video, I had mixed feelings, to say the least. There was a lot of people that agreed with me, there's a lot of people that disagreed with me, and there's a lot of people that felt like I was having a biased slant because of the fact that I am from Texas, I was born and raised in Texas, and that I was being wrongfully harsh to California. Now, regardless of how you feel about my last video, about California, about Texas, and all of the issues that I talked about in that last video, I thought it would be interesting to do a follow-up video on that, this time breaking down some of the potential alternative states from California. So in today's video, I want to break down some of the different states that you could explore if you're somebody who's wanting to leave California. I want to analyze and compare some of the metrics like minimum wage, like property taxes, like cost of living, as well as opportunities for new business owners, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. So let's get started. Now, the basis of my last video was really based off of the fact that the income tax in California is quite high compared to a lot of other states, especially considering the fact that there are a number of states in the United States that don't have any income tax at all. Those states include Alaska, Florida, Wyoming, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and Washington. These are all of the states that do not have income tax. And so if you're somebody who's wanting to kind of give yourself a pay boost by not having to pay that income tax, then these are the states that you could potentially explore. Now, in my last video, I was criticized for the fact that I did not mention property tax. And you're right, I didn't mention property tax in my last video. I specifically referenced income tax. And so in this video, I wanted to talk about the property tax. Now, of the no income tax states that I mentioned earlier, here are the average property taxes that you could expect to pay if you decided to move to one of these states. Keep in mind that California has an average property tax of 0.77%. So Texas's average property tax is 1.83%. Alaska is 1.19%. Florida is 0.98%. Wyoming is the highest at 4%, and depending on the local municipalities, you could in some cases pay as high as 6%. Nevada is 0.69. It is actually the lowest of all of the no income tax states. New Hampshire is 2.2%. South Dakota is 1.32%, Tennessee is 0.74%, and Washington is 1.08%. Now, granted, there are only two of these no income tax states that have a lower property tax than California. That is Nevada and that is Tennessee. And so if property tax is something that is incredibly important to you, then these are two states that would be worth pursuing to move to. Now, the comparison of income tax versus property tax and where you can gain the most money is something that would be up to you. So the fact is that you would have to weigh out your options and figure out which one is more important to you, low property taxes or little to no income taxes. And if you're somebody who's wanting both, then Tennessee and Nevada are two options for you because they both have no income tax and they both have lower property tax than California. Next is the average minimum wage. Now, this is another thing that I was criticized for in the last video because of the fact that California has a higher minimum wage than most states out there. And so I wanted to break down what the minimum wage is of all of these states. Now, keep in mind that minimum wage is only important as it's compared to the cost of living. If you have a minimum wage that's, $15 an hour, but the cost of living is 500% higher than any other state, then that $15 per hour doesn't really make a difference. Now, that isn't what the case is in California, and those aren't the exact numbers, but we're going to be breaking those down. But as I'm going through the minimum wage, keep that in mind, that cost of living plays an incredibly important role as to how far that minimum wage will go. So keep in mind that the federal minimum wage is $7.25, which means that in the entire country, states have to have a federal minimum wage of at least $7.25, and it's really up to the states if they want to go above that. Now, for a point of reference, California's minimum wage is $12 per hour. They are actually the highest of the ones that we'll be talking about today. Texas has an average minimum wage of $7.25. Alaska's is $9.89. Florida is $8.46. Wyoming is $7.25. Nevada is $8.25. New Hampshire is $7.25. South Dakota is $9.10. Tennessee is $7.25, and Washington is $12. So now let's dig into cost of living. Now, cost of living is incredibly important because it really dictates how far that minimum wage will go. The fact is that average minimum wage is not created equal, even though currency is the same throughout the entire US. It isn't created equal across the United States because a dollar is going to go much further in a small town in Tennessee than it will in Los Angeles and so many other cases all across the country. Depending on where you live will dictate how far a dollar bill will go. And so with that, it is important to keep that in mind whenever we're discussing things like minimum wage. So with that, let's dig into the numbers. Now, this is all based off of a scale of 100, with 100 being the average cost of living in the United States. So let's talk about California. Keep in mind, this is again of a score based off of 100. So California's cost of living score is 149.9, so they are significantly higher than the average. Texas, in comparison, is 93.9. Alaska is 125.8, which actually I was quite surprised with Alaska, but I guess that has to do with the fact that it's so far out, it's more expensive for groceries, things like that. Florida is 102.8. Wyoming is 98.1. Nevada is 110.5. New Hampshire is 105.4. South Dakota is 88.3. Tennessee is 87.6. Washington is 118.7, and again, California is 149.9. So you can see here, these are the average cost of livings. Alaska is the highest of the no-income states, and that is the closest one that compares to California. But Tennessee is significantly below the average, as is South Dakota, and there are a number of states that are just hovering on that average mark. Texas is below average, Florida is just slightly above, and New Hampshire is slightly above as well. Now that really covers the personal aspects of the taxes that I wanted to discuss in this video. And one thing that I wanted to note and I wanted to touch on is the business side of things, because that is an important aspect of it as well. What state would be the best state to move to if you're somebody who's wanting to start a business? Now, in doing research for this video, I found that there is a really complicated answer to that question because there are a number of different things to take into account. Do you want to be surrounded by people who are also doing the same type of business as you? Do you want to have access to funding? Do you want to have access to low taxes? Do you want to have access to land and resources? So depending on what you are wanting to do would really heavily dictate on where you would live. For example, one of the things that I was criticized for in my last video was the fact that I did not take into account the fact that California is the place to be as far as tech goes. And that is true, historically speaking at least. In fact, in a study done by Forbes, it found that in 2018, California was the #1 state in the entire country for VC funding for startups, or venture capitalist funding for startups. In the year of 2018, California alone received $77.3 billion in VC funding, with an average of about $23 million per startup for that year. So if you're looking for VC funding, California could absolutely be a good place to go. But for example, if VC funding wasn't the #1 priority for you, and instead growth and the growth of a state was more important, then a state like North Dakota, Utah, Florida, Texas, or Nevada would be better options. Now, the fact is there are so many different options to choose from when you're looking at your states, and the fact is that what's important for me in a state is not going to be what's important to you. Now, of all the states that we talked about today, the one that would make the most sense to move to would be Tennessee. Now, Tennessee has no income tax. The property tax is lower than California with 0.74%. The average minimum wage is low at $7.25 per hour, but the cost of living makes up for that with the lowest cost of living of all the states we discussed, which was a score of 87.6 out of 100 versus the 149.8 in California. So if we were to base our decision of where we wanted to live off of taxes and money alone, then Tennessee would be a really solid choice to choose. Now, I know that this video really oversimplifies the entire process of choosing where you want to live or where you want to grow a business, and that it isn't as simple as just looking at the tax rates and choosing the one with the lowest rate. There are a slew of other factors that come into play that I haven't even touched on in this video, and I understand that those are sometimes even more important than money and taxes. But what I really wanted to cover in this video is the fact that there are a number of advantages and disadvantages with a number of different states. You're right, Texas, even though there is no income tax, there are a lot of other downfalls with it, like the high property tax. In Tennessee, there is a lower cost of living, but the minimum wage is low as well. The fact is that there are pros and cons to every single state, and it isn't as simple as just looking at tax rates and statistics in order to decide which one is the best. But with that being said, you guys, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the arguments that I made, what your thoughts are on the best states to live in or grow a business. And so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.